Happy Friday. It's time for the Richard Skipper Friday Wrap-Up Show. Who and what are you celebrating today? Richard Skipper believes every day is worth celebrating. But today, we wrap up the week with a dose of positivity. You never know who might show up or what might happen, so get ready. Your skipper is now coming on board, and we are ready to set sail. All aboard!
Happy New Year, everyone. Happy Friday. Happy whatever it is that you're celebrating. And I have a lot to celebrate. It's National Book Blitz Month, and I am surrounded by books. I love books. As a matter of fact, my husband, Danny, he was up till 2 o'clock this morning putting new bookshelves in my office because I am overrun with books. Books are arriving every single day. Those of you who follow this show know that over the past 3 years that I've been doing this, because of COVID, I have had the great pleasure of celebrating so many incredible authors and their books on this show. I want to give you just a sampling of just a few of the authors that we have celebrated over the past 3 years as we get ready to celebrate 3 more today. Here they are. Enjoy. And Nancy Edwards is here today. Nancy is an author who has an incredible book out. I have been reading about this book. It is on its way. Thank you, Amazon. Not one, not even one, a memoir of life-altering experiences in Sierra Leone, West Africa. First of all, welcome to the show. And I want to begin by asking, because this is Richard Skipper Celebrates, who or what are you celebrating today?
Oh, well, I'm always celebrating my young grandson, who's almost 3 years old, and we had a good day of playtime yesterday, celebrating good health, celebrating being on your show. And,
well, thank you for that. And I have to ask you, do you read to him? I mean, is he getting to enjoy books at this young age?
He is, actually, and it's a lot of fun. Of course, he gets to pick out the book, so it might not be what I would choose. My favorite one now is about colors because he's learning all the colors. So I find it a bit boring, but I try to read with enthusiasm.
Well, that's great. Well, first of all, I want to talk about your book, obviously. We have 3 amazing guests on the show today. Let's start with your title.
Yes.
How did you come up with the title? And if you can give us a little background on why this title.
Absolutely. Well, the not one, not even one part is what I'll explain. And actually, there's a poem at the beginning of the book that outlines the story behind it. But in brief, this was an older woman that I met at a clinic we held in Sierra Leone. We were in a very rural area. And although the clinic was for pregnant women, she was well beyond that period of time in her life. She was determined to see our public health team, and she wanted to explain to us that she had had 12 children and none of them were alive.
Wow.
She had lost most of them before the age of 5 years. And that, unfortunately, was a much too common story that we heard. But what she said to me was, not one, not even one child lives. And that just has always stuck with me. And it seemed a suitable name for the poem. So some of this, I hope, is giving her voice through the memoir.
Now, according to the notes that I've read, you wrote this book mostly during COVID, or was COVID the impetus for you writing the book, or was this something that had been mulling around in your head for quite some time?
No, I've been thinking about it for a while. I wrote a number of short stories about my experiences in Sierra Leone for my family about 10 years ago now. They were always saying to me, you don't tell us very much about what happened there, and we'd like to know more. So I actually did that for Christmas one year. And then when I retired a few years ago, I thought, well, maybe a memoir is something that I'd like to try and write. And then COVID, I think, just gave it sort of more momentum. I had more time to write and nothing else to do really. So staying in the house. So it glued me to the chair. So it probably got the project done faster. But I think I would have written it anyhow.
Now, you already told us about your grandson. Do you live alone, or do you have a husband with you or a partner? I asked this question. There's a reason for my questioning. In a moment, you'll know. But I asked this because what is your process? Obviously, did you keep journals when you were in West Africa, or is it since memory that you're going on?
Well, I do live alone. My grandson lives nearby. My partner and I are no longer together. But my process really was, first of all, starting with all the journals that I did keep. And some of them were very detailed, especially when I was doing some evaluation and research in the country. I was keeping more detailed journals then, partly to vent some of the challenges I was experiencing day to day. When I was there in the country, I was there for 5 years. In the early days, the work was quite daunting, and I often had at least 2 jobs because of people having to unexpectedly return home suddenly. So I didn't keep as many journals then, but I did write letters home very often. However, I was disappointed when I went back and read them and saw how little I actually disclosed. But I also had a lot of materials that I collected in the country over time. So it's a combination of actually photographs that jogged my memory, audio tapes I kept of singing and dancing and so on.
Now, that's something I want to talk about, because you did mention in your notes to me that, especially for our audiences that follow the entertainment world, about the singing and the dancing in these villages. And it was very much a part of their lifestyle.
Absolutely. And it was fabulous. It was, you just would feel the vibe, and everybody was a really good dancer that I met in the country. We started doing health education where they would sing and dance as we came into the village to do a drama. And everybody would come out for it because it was really the only form of entertainment that was there. And the singing was done with usually a lead singer, and then everybody would join in the chorus, and they'd set up a conga line often and wander through the village. And they'd celebrate key events, whether that be marriages or funerals or harvest season, initiation of girls and boys into the societies, and births in particular. And the traditional birth attendants had many songs that they sung as part of their midwifery practice.
What surprised you the most about yourself in terms of writing this book? What did you learn about yourself going back? Obviously, as I said earlier, you're relying on 2 methods, sense memory and the journals that you kept at the time that you were actually living it.
Yes, that's a great question. I think one of the things I would say is just sort of how deeply embedded and vivid the memories still were, because some of these were things I hadn't really thought about, in day-to-day living, being back in Canada for a number of years. And it was like almost a switch that would flick in my brain. And it was like I was back in the moment as I wrote about it, and reflecting in different ways now, I suppose, than the way I reflected on it at the time, with maturity and other experiences and so on. And the emotions that just welled up in me as I wrote some of it, I think surprised me. But I knew I was getting closer to what I needed to write when that happened, as opposed to my academic writing where you take yourself out of it. Now you put yourself into it.
How long has it been since the book has actually been completed and is on the bookshelves and now is available for us to purchase?
It was published in February of last year, 2022.
If I'm not mistaken, it was published on February 11th.
That's right.
That's my birthday.
Oh, no kidding.
There's a connection.
Well, there we go. And hopefully some other connections too.
Yes. So are there other books in your future that you're writing, or do you have something that you're currently working on?
Oh, I have some other ideas, and I've started to do a bit of writing about some of my other travel experiences. But my main focus right now is actually shifting into learning how to convert some of the stories in the book to oral storytelling. And the way you tell them well as oral stories is not the same way that you write them and read them. And my hope is actually to develop a play So I'm in the process of figuring out how to do that now. So that's a whole new type of writing for me.
So
But
I'm going
that's
to make a
what I would like to do.
recommendation. Yesterday, I had Ronald Brand on the show. He has a book called Solo Transformation,
Uh-huh.
and it's all about solo acting, and whether this be a solo play or beyond. I highly recommend his book.
Thank you. I'll look for that one.
So before we bring our next guest on,
Mhm.
I always have a mystery question just for
Yes.
fun. So you get to pull a number 1 through 3.
Okay, I'll take 3.
And the question is, what's the first music that you bought? I'm going to change this. What's the first book that you remember ever buying?
Ever buying myself? Oh
Yeah.
my goodness. Oh, I've always been such a big public library user. I'm maybe describing a book that I got from a public library instead. Uh, I think it would have been a book about Newfoundland, actually, because I lived and worked there for a number of years, and maybe one of Farley Mowatt's books.
Wow. Well, we're going to bring our next guest on. Thank you, and stick around.
I will.
Dr. Nicholas Kardaras has written, first of all, he wrote a book called Glow Kids. And this is a follow-up to that, Digital Madness. I can't wait to sit down and talk with him because I have not been able to put this book down. Those of you who follow me know that I have taken a break from Facebook. And I left Facebook on December 1st, and I'm not missing it. I do pop in one day a month just to expand my audience with this platform. And that's it. That's my only connection with it now. There are so many questions that I have for you. But first of all, welcome to the show. Meet Nancy. And as I begin with you, I'd like to begin by asking, who or what are you celebrating today?
By the way, Richard, thank you for having me on the show, and it's an honor to be here with everybody else. I guess I'm celebrating health. We've had some family health challenges this year, so my family's particularly appreciative of going through a better period. So health, I think, is first and foremost right now.
Well, do you mind if I go there for a moment?
Sure.
Because your book opens, you were writing this book during COVID. Your father passes away. This is very early on, as your book is beginning. But I love the fact that you're bridging the past with the present, and how I think back to a time, and as I was reading about your own father, I was thinking about the times being with my grandparents, my own parents, those times where we weren't constantly looking at our phones. We weren't constantly reaching out to see what was happening on social media and everything. What was it originally that, and of course you dig so deeply into how this is affecting the psyche of this country. And I see it daily. And as I'm reading these things, I'm going, aha, that's what I've been saying. So what was it that compelled you, if for lack of a better word, to sit down, and let's start with Glow Kids, to write that book?
Yeah. I was just going to say, polarizing social media in this country, what can go wrong? And thank you for bringing up the issue with my father. That really helped provide some really crystallized issue. As you said, my father essentially became an anachronism, a stranger in a strange land in this increasingly digitized world. And my trips to visit him as he was dying of very painful bone cancer right before COVID, like 3-4 months right before COVID hit, I would fly there from Austin to New York to visit him. And our conversations were just a snapshot of the way things used to be in a way that was very, very different. And it just brought up for me the way that we've forgotten old wisdom. In this information age, we've lost our wisdom. And I think that's part of it. We have a lot of data, not a lot of real, more meaningful insight. What led me to write Glow Kids in 2016 was I'm a frontline clinician. I was a professor and also a clinician treating young people. And I had eyes. I had the ability to look around and say that something different was happening. My professional background was also mental health, but also addictive disorders. And I worked for decades with substance addiction and started seeing the telltale signs of addictive disorders with screens and our love affair with screens and what they were doing to children, both developmentally, cognitively, emotionally. And so that was book one. And then Digital Madness was really, okay, so the price of admission was addiction, was habituation. Big tech has certainly trapped us all in their cage, in the digital cage, and it's very sugar lined. We love the cage that we're trapped in.
Mm-hmm.
But what did that habituation lead to? And that's what I talk about more in this next book, where I talk about the mental health crisis that we're going through, which is disproportionately affecting young people, higher rates of suicide, anxiety, overdose, depression, which, again, if you look at the generational cohorts from Gen X, well, let's go to baby boomers, to Gen X, to millennials, to Gen Z, to, yeah, I'm getting the cohorts correct. The younger the cohorts get, the more mentally unwell they are, the higher rates of psychiatric disorder. So again, I'm somebody who can read data in the landscape well, and you scratch your head and you wonder, why are our most plugged in the most unwell? And then you begin to look at some of the research about what this habituation, it's not just that we're habituated or that our young ones are more vulnerable to things like now personality disorders and psychiatric issues and depression. The big one is depression. Depression and self-harm and the lack of purpose in one's life has been probably the biggest byproduct of this digital love affair.
What do you think the solution is?
Well, I'd snap my fingers and we'd go back to an earlier time.
I'll go with you.
So obviously, as I speak a lot at conferences, obviously we're not putting the genie back in the bottle, for better or for worse. And no one's proposing that we go Amish unless we're in a post-apocalyptic period, and then we may not have any electricity. But the solution, what I feel, is the countervailing force of this digital habituation, because what it's done, I use the language of our psychological immune system, especially the younger you are, and the more screen immersed you are, the more you compromise your psychological immune system. So our younger people are more vulnerable now towards, they're going through identity issues and I have treatment programs around the country. You see it with teenagers and young adults. They're a much more fragile cohort. They're much more self-harming and reactive. They have a much harder time handling life on life's terms. So how do we immunize and increase their psychological immune system in this highly toxic age? So that's where I go back to things like the classics. I go back to, immersing oneself in the reading of books and classical philosophy. And I use the archetype of the philosopher warrior to really thrive in this really toxic culture and society that we've created. How do we embrace critical thinking, wisdom, the philosopher, and then the archetype of the warrior, resilience, strength, perseverance, the hero's journey, a sense of purpose in our lives. So that's helping others and all those other things that we used to do before we became narcissistically belly button staring, egocentric people, and that's been another byproduct. A lot of young people that I work with are so self-absorbed rather than self-reflective, because the digital landscape.
Statement? It's not just the young people. There are a lot of older people as well that have fallen down that rabbit hole.
Right.
And yeah, and it's funny because I'm reminded. I'm probably a little older than both of you, but I grew up. I remember a show called You Bet Your Life, the original, and a duck would come out of the ceiling, and the word of the day.
Groucho Marx.
Yes, Groucho Marx. Narcissism. That's the word of the day, because there's so much narcissism going on that my concern, my fear, and this is one of the reasons why I decided to step away from Facebook. A very dear friend of mine passed away a couple of months ago. And a colleague of mine that I had worked with on a show with him, when I reached out to say, did you know that he had passed away? his response was, well, yes, I figured you of all people would know because you're always on Facebook. Well, number one, I'm not always on Facebook.
Mm.
And number two, this is a life-altering moment. And I feel that we've come to this swipe mentality where I desire for myself to be more than just another item in someone's newsfeed. And I think that that's what's happening with all of us, that we are all becoming items in news feeds, and we just move on. And then, we forget about it and we move on to the next and we move on to the next. And I don't think that we're taking the time to grieve. I don't think that we're taking the time to really connect with one another on a level that we used to. I did, a show just a couple of days ago where I was interviewed about life in New York in the late 1970s, before we had social media, in terms of how people interacted. And it was a whole different world, of course, in terms of we all remember what it was like. And I wish that we could snap our fingers and go back to that.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. And, we're also going through what people are calling a loneliness epidemic, which is ironic because we're the most connected generation or, society in the history of humanity. So why are we so lonely? Because the Kool-Aid that we were sold was that this was going to be the great connector, right? That this was going to be a social media for a social species. This is supposed to be like chocolate and peanut butter. We were supposed to really be thriving in this new generation of connectivity. And in fact, the opposites happened because, as I write about in the book, it's counterfeit connection. It's sugar-coated fake connection. And it's not connection in the meaningful way that you just mentioned, right? The face-to-face, like what's really going on with your life. We're not data points in somebody's news feed. And so it gives us the illusion of connection, and yet it's robbing us of genuine connection. So we're all genuine connection starved, but meanwhile we think we have, a million friends on Facebook or Instagram or whatever. And that's a big part of the problem.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to let you pick your mystery question, one or two, and then we're going to bring on our next guest, and then we're going to have a little fun getting to know each other and celebrating books today. So one or two. Well,
Nancy stole my number 3, which is my favorite number. So I'm going to have to, I'll go with 1.
And your question is, what's your most powerful and vivid memory? I'm going to go back. What's your most powerful and vivid memory prior to social media?
Well, I'm a coma survivor from a few decades ago, and so I have a very vivid memory emerging from a coma. And I don't want to get into the details thereof, but that's one of my vivid memories is emerging from that experience.
Is that a book that we may see?
I talk about it in the first book that I wrote was How Plato and Pythagoras Can Save Your Life, and I gave it a chapter in there. I don't fully talk about it. In fact, I'm working on a project about that right now, and it does dovetail with New York in the 70s and 80s, by the way. I was a victim of a certain lifestyle in New York in the 70s and 80s that led to certain self-destructive habits that led to that.
Well, there was a lot of that going on. New York was a very different New York when I arrived here. So, well, God bless you for surviving, and God bless the work you're doing. And I discovered this wonderful new book. And by the way, everyone who's watching, we're going to do a little giveaway at the end, maybe, because there's a little caveat. Nancy, you put a seed in my head today. And I appreciate that seed that you planted. But I want to talk about this next book, The Exploits of Minerva, Reflections of a 60-something Woman. And as I said to our next guest, it may have been written about women, maybe for women, but I'm getting a lot out of this as well as a 60-something man. First of all, Pamela, welcome to the show. I'm so thrilled that you're here today. Welcome to our panel. This is a great memoir. It's written as a quote-unquote fiction because it's true, but you've changed the names and everything. But all of the stories in it are based on real life stories. Am I correct on that?
That's correct. You
Okay.
are.
You sit down to write a memoir, and I want to talk to all of you in a few moments about writing memoirs. But sitting down to write a memoir, why did you personally decide to go that route instead of, you put this shield around you, so to speak, rather than just telling your story? If you don't mind my asking that question.
That's a great question. And I think you're going to be surprised at my answer, Richard. I started out to write fiction, and I thought I was writing fiction. And then when I chose my publisher, and the manuscript reviewer reviewed it, and she said, this part memoir, part self-help guide. And I'm like, didn't she read the genre's fiction? And I'm talking to I had a publishing coordinator who stick handled my book through the process, but her role was not to read the manuscript, right? And I'm telling her, and I'm saying, I don't get it. And I told her about it, and she said, Pam, I think it's creative nonfiction. And I'm like, I didn't even know what that was. I call it creative nonfiction. That is what it is. So it has a timeline. And the stories are
did you hit a button or something? Because all of a sudden everything's coming a little garbled.
Okay, I'll try that.
Okay, I think you fixed it.
Okay, maybe I moved too far away from the mic.
No, that's fine.
Thank you for letting me know that.
Okay.
Anyway, creative nonfiction has a hook and a storyline. So it presents as fiction and draws people in. However, the stories are very real, right? And so what happened is, what I did is I chose to interview friends and friends of friends about the various life transitions they'd gone through. And I integrated some of my own in there as well. And then Minerva, if I'll shed some light on her, Minerva was an essence who came to me about 25 years ago when I was riding on a bike path in Ottawa. And I was actually a member of the Ottawa Independent Writers at the time, because I was planning to not write creatively until I retired. And then I thought, Pam, what are you waiting for? That's just stupid. So I joined this group, and then Minerva came to me, and I thought, I don't have time to write about you. I just launched my consulting company. My kids are young. So I shelved her. And a couple of years ago, she came back to me and she said, you have to write about me. So that's how Minerva came. And I don't even know about her name, where that came from. But it's all very relevant in terms of the storyline.
I'm reminded of an episode of Golden Girls in which Blanche's sister writes a book of fiction, and everyone's trying to figure out which of those characters is based on them. So you said you did interview your friends and the people in your circle, and I know that you're part of a book club. It's not a book club, but it's a group of women that you meet with on a regular basis. And were they part of the process as well?
Actually, they weren't. I am in a women's circle, and I had to take special training to get into it. It's almost 4 years ago that I joined, because I was quite new to Victoria, and I thought it was a way to meet other women outside of my work. And so I used that context, and we do have experiential exercises that we integrate. So then I was able to integrate some of my Art of Change framework in the work I do with people and organizations around change. So it kind of just naturally fed one to the other. And I know that my experience in a women's circle has been very transformational. So I thought that was an excellent context to use. But no, I did not interview any of the women. And again, that's another piece of the book. It says it's for 20 years these women have been meeting. Well, I haven't been in one for 20 years. So I sort of stretch the truth around certain things. However, I have lived experience with them.
Well, I love the little biographical backgrounds that you give of each one of them, so that we have a real sense of who they all are. So what did you learn about yourself from writing this book? And from writing this book, I get the sense that you have reached a point where everything just, you just go out and live your life my Alexa just went off. Where you just live your life to the fullest. Devil may care. Am I correct on that?
I believe that life is an adventure to be lived to the fullest. And that's been my mantra. That's what I say about Minerva. And really, that's been my life. If I was in a job and I get bored quite quickly. I shouldn't say that, but when I used to work for other people in organizations, after about 3 years, that was my limit. And I'd start to say, what else? And the universe would either send me an opportunity, or I'd be out somewhere and again, meet somebody and it's like, Pam, do you want to join our consulting group? Okay, sure, I'll do that. Leave my really good government job and lose all my pension benefits because I didn't stay for 4 years or whatever. And likewise, traveling. When in 1974, I was going to backpack Europe with a girlfriend. She decided to get married at 20 at the last minute. And I went by myself, like, excuse me, I'm just going to do it, right?
Good for you. I love hearing that. So I'm going to ask you your mystery question. It's the last one remaining. Love this. And it's maybe in the book, maybe not. Who was your first love and when?
Oh, goodness. My first real love, I mean, you have, I can remember somebody in kindergarten that I thought was really cute. That wasn't my first love. My first love was when I was in high school, and his name was Brian, and sadly he was killed in a motor vehicle accident when he was 24, just starting his marine biology career. He was my first love.
That's great. Well, God bless Brian. And so I want to ask each of you, and I'll go back to you, Nancy. Since writing this book, what is the biggest change that's happened within your circle of friends since this book has come out? It's very interesting. I have a friend who has written a book, and she says, "No, none of my friends read my book." And I go, "They're reading. Trust me, they're reading." What's the biggest change within your own circle that has happened since your book has come out?
Well, I would say that, my attention has had to shift from writing every day to marketing. And for me, it's less about marketing to get a large number of books sold. It's about how to really use this as a platform for some of the themes and messages that are in the book and finding ways to do that. So amongst my circle of friends, I think the biggest change is that they're asking me different questions because they know that I've shifted out of the writing mode for the book. And they're no longer saying, how far along are you and what chapter are you on and what pictures are you going to put in the book and that sort of thing. It's more about, well, how many have you sold and how many book clubs have you spoken to and what's that experience like for you? And many of them actually have read it. I'm fortunate.
That's great. That's wonderful. Yeah. And what about you, Dr. K? Within your own circle, with this book especially, this is a hot topic with so many people. What is the response that you're getting among your friends?
Yeah, I would say amongst my colleagues, it is a hot, it's a current topic. So amongst colleagues, it's I get leaned on a lot, and then we discuss things, and but my personal friends, this is the third book that I've written, and this was the most challenging by far. Combination of COVID, combination of, like I said, some family issues that were going on. And so the first two books I wrote were, finished them quickly, and it was a joy, and I was light on my feet, and my friends, and we used to discuss them. This one was a beast to finish. I was physically exhausted afterwards, and so I didn't really want to discuss the book with my friends, quite honestly. I wanted to discuss anything else except this topic with my friends. And I think, because it is so kind of in the ether, and I think because of, the Glow Kids had some similar topics, they were like, wow, it's amazing that you've written this book and it's spot on. But yeah, how about those Mets, or, how about that movie? And I think we kind of purposely, amongst my friends, different than amongst my professional colleagues.
And Pam, what about you in your situation?
Well, I just launched my book December the 8th. And then I went to visit my kids and grandkids for about a week just after that. And so I had a lot of input.
We're getting the same feedback, Pam.
I did have a virtual book launch party, and a number of friends from the past and present attended. So that was awesome to support me. And my women's circle, they have supported me as well in terms of purchasing and giving to other friends and colleagues. I have not been to my book club for the last couple of months because of my hip replacement surgery. And the next one is I'm hosting on January 17th. So I'll be interested to hear what they have to say, because only a few of them responded when I told them I was launching, because I hadn't really told them I was writing this book very much. I was sort of keeping it on the, so we'll see. So I'm still open to the response, if you know what I'm saying.
That's great. Nancy, you made me think about something that I want to ask each of you. What is the biggest thing that has surprised you in terms of marketing and promotion when it comes to this book? A lot of people may be surprised at what book publishers do and do not do. And I do know from many of the authors that I've had on the show, many of my friends that are writers, that a lot of the responsibility truly lies on your shoulders. So what is the biggest surprise that you've learned about yourself in terms of getting the message out to the general public about your book?
Who is that for?
For you.
For me. Well, I would say the amount of time it takes and how to carve that into my day is something I've had to learn. And it's different than when you're writing, where you can sort of, protect several hours in a day. Often for me, that was early morning. But this has to be kind of all over the place because opportunities come up and you have to be ready to speak. And I would say in terms of challenges, I thought it would be relatively easy to get books into public libraries. But that actually takes a tremendous amount of work.
Yes.
It's something I feel is really important, and I've worked hard at it. But every single library has to be approached individually, basically. I've had some success, but so I guess part of what I'm learning about myself is that I'm still a pretty tenacious person, even though I'm now a 70-something person.
That's right. Dr. K, same question.
Again, I'm going to contrast it with my last book and this book. When I wrote Glow Kids in 2016, I was sort of, my first book about philosophy, died a slow death on the shelf. Not a lot of people wanted to read a book about Plato and Pythagoras. And when I wrote Glow Kids, I sort of caught lightning in the bottle because the timing was right about screen effects, and my publisher had wanted me to write a couple of op-eds at the time to kind of cross-promote the book. And I wrote an op-ed for the New York Post called Digital Heroine, which went viral and got a lot of attention and got me on a lot of national news shows, Good Morning America and CNN, and a lot of shows to actually debate this idea that, is it possible that our devices can be habit forming, which was a new idea 6 years ago. So there was a lot of synergistic media that happened and events that happened, and I was much more willing to do that. And for some reason, I don't know if as I've aged with this particular book, I've written this book and I'm sort of leaning back from it. There have been some good, nice media opportunities, but I'm being a little bit more organic about how this is going to unfold. My publishers wanted me to do more things, Nancy, I relate to what you're saying, but I've been a little bit resistant to beat the drum as much. I didn't, and because my book is sort of against social media, and so much of the networking is, I'm not on Instagram, I'm not on Twitter, and I am on Facebook just to keep up with old college and high school friends. But so I don't do that game. I'm not an influencer in that sense. Although my Glow Kids gave me a platform, I have a very strong following of, we call it the mommy mafia that do follow me. But I've sort of just let it be more natural this time around and spend time with my kids actually. Rather than,
good for you.
Podcast is really interesting.
Yeah.
Yes. Pam?
Well, this is my second book as well. And my first one, Learning to Dance with Life, A Guide for High Achieving Women, I launched in 2015. And it made #1 on Amazon when I launched. And that was based on having friends who had published previously and having their support on launch day. And however, I had no strategy to keep it up in the ratings on Amazon. And so this time I went with a different publisher, and I made assumptions, and I was actually in some ways disappointed because I expected certain things out of the publisher that didn't happen. I'm happy with the product. So it's interesting, the diversity among different publishers. It's not always same.
Mhm.
And I knew from the get-go, if I didn't choose a marketing package, I would have to do it on my own. I love, business is all about experimenting. And my first book I launched at a winery, and I had a coaching client who was co-owner of this winery, who was around the corner from where I lived. And so I had a Wine, Women, and Words book party. The reason I'm saying this, and it was over 100 women, that's all that they could accommodate, and it was interactive, right? So this time I went totally different and did a virtual one, which was fun, not as many people. So I'm constantly learning and growing from it. But like Nancy and Nicholas said, I am all about connection, and I also run a nonprofit that I feel very strongly about what we're doing. And for me, when I look at growing that nonprofit, it's not so much the social media, even though it's a national nonprofit, that attracts the people. It's more the connections, people talking to people, coming to events, getting a feeling of the vibe. So I really feel like there will be some changes, I think, in terms of how we market moving forward. But I know Nancy does a lot of work with book clubs. Who knows? Maybe that's the way for me to go as well. So anyway, I think it's kind of the dawn of a new era in terms of marketing, and we need to look at new ways where we feel more interested in doing it. And it's not just about the numbers; it's about connecting with the folks and getting real reviews from people.
Mm-hmm. And I think COVID has mixed it all up for everybody anyhow, right?
Yes.
Well, you've just given me my next question. So, Nancy, how has COVID helped you, and how has it hurt you? I mean, it's really thrown a monkey wrench into the way everyone does business. And I'm sure that the book industry is in a topsy-turvy world right now because of COVID. What are the pluses and minuses as far as the timing of your book coming out?
Well, I didn't really have any control over the timing because it's a self-published book with Friesen Press, and once we started the contract, then that determined the timing of publication. So who knew, even 2 days from now, what COVID is going to look like, right?
Exactly.
Never mind 8 months from when I signed the contract. But I would say that a virtual launch, I did not do. It was the only kind of launch I could have done, actually. So maybe I should have done that. But I see launch as something that sort of happens over many months as opposed to being a single event, and really thought about how to use my network. So I think COVID made me think harder, maybe, about and be more creative about different ways to get the book out there and how to use those networks of connections that I have. And I've learned, not to be disappointed when not everything works the way you expect it to.
Okay, thank you for that. Dr. Kay?
Yeah, interesting. So yeah, I've worked with the same publisher for the last two books. Am I getting feedback? Are you getting feedback?
I'm getting feedback. If there's another window open by anyone, that will cause a little feedback.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, my last book was before COVID. This one was post-COVID. And it's interesting, even within the same publisher, their marketing strategies were different. Same publicist, same publisher. And back then they were doing different things, the way they publish it. Quite honestly, like this podcast now, things are so podcast dominated, and that wasn't the thing really in 2016. So now a lot of the marketing post-COVID is digital and podcast based, and which is good. I think this is one of the benefits of obviously the new norms and the new reality is we can do things like this, which is obviously beneficial. I used to do a lot of conferences, and a lot of the conferences got either Zoom based, which really weren't as good, and they're just coming out of their shell right now, so that was a big part of my platforming, was speaking at mental health and education conferences, and those are just beginning, like I said, to thaw out from the plague. So yeah, just different. I think it reflects the times, but I think the topic of my book is resonant with a lot of people because I do talk quite a bit about how COVID amplified screen dependence, which amplified some of these mental health effects. So it was relevant to what I wrote about. This is why many of our kids were not just losing grade level, but they were losing their minds, and they were getting more and more unwell, post-COVID, because of a year and a half of Zoom schooling and everything else that happened.
Yeah, physical activity dropped.
Yeah,
hugely.
exactly.
Yeah, many after effects.
Yeah,
absolutely. And the question may be a little redundant for you, Pamela, because your book just came out just last month. But how is this time frame? Is it prohibiting you in any way whatsoever? And I know that you've also had other issues with a new hip. So how has that all come together with you?
Well, it's interesting. I originally planned to launch in January. And then I found out my book was on Amazon on October 31st. And I found out only about a week after, when I understood that from others, what I'd been told, that it could take up to 6 weeks to be on Amazon. Was told if you didn't launch before American Thanksgiving, to wait till after Christmas. Then about November 7th or whatever it was, when I checked Amazon in a number of markets just for interest, and I saw my book had been on Amazon since October 31st, I thought to myself, this is crazy. I can't have this book sitting there for 2.5 months before I launch. So my VA, who's based in South Africa, was actually on vacation. I woke up in the middle of the night. I went downstairs and sat and shut my eyes. And I said, what's the date I'm going to launch? And I got December the 8th. So regardless of my publishing buddies who told me don't do it, then I just thought, okay, I'm going with what I'm getting. And so that's what I did. So we'll see how it goes. I did quite well on launch day. I didn't quite make number 1 this time. I made number 3. But you know what? It was a rustle on, because my VA got back November 16th, and we just did it.
So writing a book is a lot like giving birth. So Nancy, I want to ask you, when did you know that the book was ready to let go of? Was this a decision that you made, or was it a decision that your editor made, or was it a decision that the publisher made?
Yeah. I'm sorry, Nancy. Go ahead.
Sorry, was it for Dr. K?
No, for you, Nancy.
Okay. Well, it wasn't a publisher decision. I would say there were several phases of it, because I, went through beta reading and so on. And so there was different periods when I was making a decision about the next phase and whether or not I was ready to move on to the next phase. I think you just kind of know in your gut whether you've got something that is ready, and have you just put everything you can into it. Yeah, I think you have to get rid of this idea that a perfect book is possible. I don't think it is. Looking back, there are some things I would still change about that book. And maybe if I make a play, I can incorporate some of those changes in the play. But yeah, I just kind of knew. I felt like everything in me had been poured out into the book, and that it was really honest.
Same question for you, Dr. K.
Yeah, so if this was a birthing process, this last book definitely went past term. I mean, this definitely, the baby was kicking.
Oh my goodness.
And like I said, this was different. My other babies were preemies, and this one definitely went long. And I kept trying to polish the rock. And part of my problem was I was using a lot of ripped from the headlines, recent data and stuff that was emerging, both everything about big tech and the Facebook whistleblower so this news story would come out that I would have to incorporate into the book. So I kept having, I got to add this piece, and my publisher was getting a little impatient. And it was definitely a situation where, like Nancy said, I used to have a colleague when there was an old saying, when you get your PhD, there's either there's perfect PhD, there's perfect dissertations, or there's finished dissertations, and which one do you want to do? And this is what happened with this book. Do I want to finish? So at a certain point, I think my wife nudged me and said, just finish it. Just give you this next Friday will be the last day that you keep polishing this rock. You're not going to revise it anymore. So this one was not, like I said, this one was a beast for me to finish. It went on, and again, it was the COVID cloud. My father had just died, and my kids were going crazy with Zoom schooling. So it was challenging. Yeah.
Pam?
This book, my second book, was easier to finish and to write than my first one. It just sort of flowed out of me. And in terms of finishing, similar to what Nancy said, it's a gut thing. Even I looked at the word count and it wasn't really high, you know, and I'm like, I don't care. It's done. I'm done. I'm not worried about what externals these people say, you know, ideally your book should be 60,000 words or 25,000 words. I just thought, you know what? This is it.
Put a fork in me, I'm done.
Like that, yeah.
That's great. I've got one last question that I'd like to ask each of you. Any advice that you would give to anyone out there who's thinking of writing their first book, or how it begins for each of you, and we'll go counterclockwise this time. And I'll start with you, Pamela.
Advice to give somebody. I would say to take a course from someone about writing. I personally, I'll just give Christine Closer a pitch. I took her Get Your Book Done program a number of years ago, and it was really helpful because a lot of times what people do is they just start to write and then they have to scrap it all. So I would recommend finding someone, I won't give too many names, who can give you some guidance through the process, whether it's a nonfiction or fiction. And also, if you have the resources to join a writing incubator to support you, Jen Loudon, I joined hers, and that helped me for the last 3 months. And so those are two things. Surround yourself by people who are positive and who will support you. And I would also say, don't give your beta readers don't make them your family members and even really close friends. I didn't go with any beta readers this time. I just thought, you know what? So anyway.
Great, thank you. Dr. Kay?
God, I was going to almost say the opposite. I'm sorry. I was going to say just start writing. Yeah. I mean, for me, it was kind of like that old saying: writers write. Try to write 2 pages a day, no matter what. And it might be on the path of what eventually the book is. But I think kind of getting into the habit of writing rather than the pre-contemplative state of writing, where you're going to think about writing. So I would say, if there's a book in you, I would say, look, as a therapist, we do I used to have a memoir therapy group where it was just as forget publishing, it was just as a therapy process, write your story. It was narrative therapy. And out of that, oftentimes books can emerge and ideas can emerge. So I would kind of say, just start putting pen to paper, click to clack, or whatever you want to say digitally, and start creating, and then see what flows from there organically. But probably not a bad idea to then, at some point get some guidance and some professional intervention at some point. And to not be discouraged. The climate can seem overwhelming at times. To just kind of stay true to yourself and just kind of keep leaning forward. And the process starts, what do they say? Each journey starts with the first step, right? So just keep taking one step after the other.
Yes, thank you for that. Nancy?
I would say join a writing group for sure. I joined one at the public library. I didn't know any of them. None of them were writing memoirs, but having a group that I went to every single week where I committed to reading something, even if it was only a paragraph, even if it was only something I was really stuck on, really helped. It propelled me along. I created my own writing group as well by reaching out to former CUSA volunteers and inviting them, anyone writing a memoir, if they'd like to meet with me. And I'm still meeting with 2 CUSA volunteers who have both written memoirs. And now we're talking about marketing. That's been really helpful. And I would say, perhaps very similar to you, Dr. K, sit down and start writing. I mean, you can write the first page by just writing title and your name, and then you're on to page 2 already. So, but it is a process, and it's something you have to keep working at. There's a writing muscle, I believe, and it does get easier and easier as you go. And you don't have to worry about starting at the beginning and trying to work your way to the end. Write whatever it is that is moving you that day. It may be a nightmare you've had or a conversation you've had, and you feel compelled to write something. And whether or not it ends up somewhere in the book doesn't really matter. Maybe it will, maybe it won't, but it's still propelling you along and helping you to think. Writing is a process.
Well, I want to thank you all for being here today. Don't go anywhere for a moment. I want to bring up, once again, these are the 3 books, not one, not even one, by Nancy Christine Edwards, The Exploits of Minerva, and now we know all about where Minerva came from, and, of course, Digital Madness. These are, 3 amazing books. I'm going to give my closing comments, and then I'm going to give each of you a chance to give your closing comments. It can be about anything that we talked about today that you want to expound upon, anything that we didn't talk about that you wish we had, or just any final message that you want to leave everyone with today. I was going to give away 3 books today. And I'm going to sit on those books because Nancy gave me a wonderful idea. What I would like anyone out there who is interested in getting a book, this is all you need to do. Reach out to me and tell me that you have a book group or that you belong to a book group, and choose any of these 3 titles that you would like your book group to have a chance to read and talk about. And I may even reach out to one of these 3 authors, and if they're available, they may even come and speak to your book group. I'm not making any promises. I'm just, they might do that virtually, of course. So, but just reach out to me if you're interested in any of these 3 titles. All of the information will be on my YouTube channel, so make sure that you do this. Book Blitz Month was created because people stopped reading. Digital Madness. Get your kids off of their computer screens and get them back into the pages of a good book. They'll thank you later on for it. Laura Coates, who is one of my favorite pundits on CNN, she was on the Bill Maher show a few months ago, and she has 2 teenage kids, and neither one of them have laptops or computers or any devices. And Bill Maher said, when they're screaming at you that all of their peers and their friends do, what do you say to them? And she says to them, you can take it up with me in therapy 30 years from now. So she is really in control of what her kids are doing, and she's going to love her for it. Please be aware of what your kids are doing on social media and what is coming at them on social media, because it's a 2-way street. And this book, again, Dr. K, thank you. I'm loving learning about Minerva. And Nancy, I can't wait for your book to arrive. It's on its way from Amazon. I end all of my shows by telling everyone to go out and do something nice for somebody else without expecting anything in return. Reach out to somebody that you haven't spoken to in a while, and reach out with a phone call. Not an email message, not a text message, not a private inbox message, a phone call. And let that person know what they mean. Talk about your favorite book and what that book means between the 2 of you. But whatever it is, reach out. There's nothing like human connection. I have a dear friend who says we're all in this together, but we're not in the same boat. Another friend sent me a meme, and he said, we're all in the storm together, but we're in different boats. Some are on yachts, some are in rafts, some are in canoes, some are in kayaks, some are pushing tugboats upstream. I don't care what size boat you're on. Just make sure that if you're on a boat, you have a skipper by your side. That's all I have to say. So I'm going to leave the screen. Nancy, I'm going to turn it over to you. When you finish, you'll turn it over to the person of your choice. And then the last person, when you say goodbye, the final credits will roll. Everyone, make it a great week. It's all in your hands. And go out and read a good book. There are 3 that you can choose from right here. Thank you, and have a great tomorrow. Nancy, it's all yours.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to join you today. I think my message would be that we're all challenged as we look around the world and see what's happening, whether it be the war in Ukraine or the famine in Africa, or you pick the topic. There's just so many difficulties. And I would encourage you to read books that are hopeful and that find ways to talk about the depths of strength and resilience that exist in communities to make a difference. I hope my book is one of those, and I would be pleased to discuss it with anyone who's interested. We all need to live vicariously, and I think reading books is one way to get there. I'll turn it over to Pamela.
Thanks, Nancy. Thank you, Richard, for gathering us together here. It's been really fun and great to meet some new folks and learn more about some interesting books that I'm going to read. My message is, if you feel like you've got a book in you, go for it. Believe in yourself and know that you can be the change that you want to see in the world. We need people to believe in themselves more than ever today. And if you can find some friends and some colleagues or an organization that is in alignment with your mission, vision, and values, go for it and join them. I really encourage you to connect with like-minded souls who will support you in whatever you want to do.
Unmute. Yeah. And thank you all. Richard, thank you for having me on the show. I think I want to echo your message about leaning into kindness with other people. I think it's really been a surreal time, I think, that we're all living through. These are difficult and new uncharted waters, I think, for us as a society, as people individually. These are strange days. And so we really, I think, need each other more than ever before. We have to lean into our humanity and our compassion, in spite of some of the forces that are working potentially against us. And I would leave it with that. Lean into kindness and your humanity. Thanks.